Well, I think it is a full-time job, but I do also think that historically people have always had other jobs as well. Probably the most common one was as a lawyer. So, as you know, historically people would have went to the courts in the morning time and then went to Parliament in the afternoon. That's why Parliament usually doesn't sit until about 2:30. So it has been always the case that people have had those second jobs. And I think it's very interesting that Keir Starmer has decided to come out and say, no, lawyers won't be able to practice if they're also members of Parliament. That's a huge change, Tom. An absolutely enormous change, and I think will be fought against. I'm interested to see what Boris Johnson is proposing. He's basically saying, first of all, in terms of MPs, they should, I think he says, reasonable limits to outside work. So what he's basically saying is that the primary job, the primary focus of a member of Parliament must be on their constituents. And that, of course, is absolutely right. I don't think anybody could argue against that first proposal that he's putting forward. The second proposal is perhaps a little bit more tricky for him and his backbench MPs, because he is saying that there should be a ban on being a parliamentary strategist or consultant. And there are many MPs who will be parliamentary consultants and strategists. And I suppose, Tom, it depends on how one defines what that is. And will it be defined by rules? Because if it's not, then some people will try to get around that by saying that they're just advising on policy. They're not a strategist.
Absolutely. It seems interesting who has the power here, because there's a pretty strong argument that says the only people that should have authority over members of Parliament are their constituents, who are, at the end of the day, their bosses. And I know that there have been some calls for a greater right of recall, the idea that a certain percentage of constituents could demand a fresh election if they think their MP has done something wrong. Are we potentially shifting too many powers into the hands of authorities in the House of Commons rather than the people, i.e. the constituents of MPs?
Well, of course, you are the servant of the people who put you into Parliament. And I thought Theresa May's point in the House of Commons yesterday was a very clear one, and one that comes from somebody who has been a parliamentarian for very many years. Of course, Theresa May, being the former Prime Minister, is able to make speeches all around the world. I think she earned upwards of nearly £1 million last year doing that, because she is the former Prime Minister. She is also, however, a very effective constituency member of Parliament, and I don't think you'd find anybody in her constituency who would argue against that. She's on the ground, she's always in Parliament, but yet she still finds time to make those speeches. So there has to be a balance in all of this, Tom. I think it is up to the constituency to decide whether they think their member of Parliament is doing a good job. I think Geoffrey Cox, of course, overstepped that, being away from his constituency for over a month, doing another job. And actually, he would fall within the first proposal that Boris Johnson is talking about, reasonable limits.
It is interesting what is being debated today, of course, because this isn't banning all second jobs. This isn't the proposal that the Labour Party want in the future. This is about those paid advocacy roles at the moment. And I wonder, with the Conservatives' extra amendment to this, which is about a limit to the amount of time, presumably there'd be an exemption for government ministers, who are, of course, part-time backbench MPs. But I would hasten to say that Boris Johnson spends more time being the Prime Minister than being the constituency MP for Uxbridge and South Ruislip.
Well, that's absolutely the point. Once you're in government, there's no way that you can be engaged in a second job, because you're devoting most of your time, let's be honest, to the government job. And then you're trying to do the constituency job through your constituency surgeries when you can on a Friday and at weekends. So these rules are primarily for backbench MPs. For government ministers, of course, they are ruled by conflicts of interest and everything else. So they just have to focus on their frontbench job.